ICQ Podcast, episode 354, 8 Watt Handie Talkie. Well, hello, fellow amateur ham radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 354th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Philip Heckingbottom, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, and Dave Renton, Golf 1 Delta Uniform Mike, and of course our very valued monthly annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Ed DD5 Lima Papa, and Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode we feature an 8 Watt Handie Talkie. Well, as always, it's your very kind donations that keep our show advert free, and it's a very simple system we have. All we ask is that say if you find value in the show and what we do, turn that into a financial figure. Visit icqpodcast.com/donate and send that to us in some way possible. So our first donation episode is from Phil, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, and he says, if he's correct, July is the ICQ birthday month, and to celebrate he's made an annual donation of £1 a month, along with also a donation to help us with the digital DMR rollout group that we've been talking about last few episodes, and particularly in relation to some D-Star equipment that we need to purchase. So he's hoping that his donation will go towards that, and you're certainly right, Phil. It will go towards improving things on that project, and we really do appreciate you thinking of us. But it's small correction time. As I say, before we get too inundated, he said to bio accounts, they're called Tim Tams, the biscuits we referred to in last episode, Tam Tams. And as I say, he's even seen the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson mention them on TV in Australia on a free trade agreement. Even in Ireland, Phil, it's very amazing how Tim Tams have a very big affection, say, with people even in Ireland, let alone in the UK. So, say, we need to get those on our shelves, say, in the coming feature. If anyone's looking for a reference mark of what a Tim Tam is, it's like a penguin or like a chocolate sandwich biscuit covered in chocolate. So thanks a lot, Phil, for updating us on that there. And I know we're going to be talking later on about, say, a suggestion you maybe have for what to do with a Tim Tam. So we'll be talking about later on. Okay, we also want to thank Dave as well. Dave, Golf 1 Delta Uniform Mike. He says he found our podcast a couple of episodes ago and he's really enjoying them, and he wanted to pop us along a donation. I would say to thank us for the value that we bring him. So Dave, many thanks. It's really, really appreciated when someone new finds us and finds value in what we do and sends that donation. So thank you, Dave, for doing that for us. Now, you can join Dave, Phil, and the monthly and subscription donors by helping us out. By all you have to do is go to icqpodcast.com/donate, and say whatever value you find in the show, pop it our way, and say those shekels help keep us advert free. So we really appreciate it for now. Right, well, we thank the important people, so let's go on with the show. So we need to join Martin, Chris, Ed, and Frank to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including comments requested by the FCC about 70SEMs, and the Woodpecker Chernobyl site is going to be given a heritage status. So as always, guys, hope you enjoy.
What you doing?
Feeding the chickens.
Well, are you going to take the challenge?
Yep, I plan to. You?
I'm thinking about it. What about the big guns? Think they'll win?
They didn't last year, but then they didn't show up either.
Is that why you're feeding the chickens now?
Yep. Champions are never afraid of competition. Will you take the challenge? See foxmikehotel.com/challenge.
Well, hi guys, welcome to the ICQ podcast, episode 354, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Martin. Good evening, everybody else.
Yeah, cheers, Chris, and we'll find out what you've been up to radio-wise soon, but I know you've been out and about. Mr. Rothwell can't make it tonight, Martin Rothwell, M0SGL, so I'm probably going to get into trouble on my own without him trying to bait me. Moving over to Germany, Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP's with us. Hi, Ed.
Good evening, all. I'm happy to get you into trouble, Martin.
Yeah. Most people are, mate. That's the problem. And I'm gullible.
So
Right,
I'm standing in for Martin this evening then.
all right then. No probs. Moving over to the other side of the big pond, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, is with us. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin and everyone. Glad to be here again.
Yeah, good one, Frank. And unfortunately, Mr. Bill Barnes emailed me about 2 hours before recording saying work has just put pressure on him to do something that has to get done. So, unfortunately, Bill's not with us this episode due to work pressures. But we wish Bill and Martin are back with us probably by the next episode. So, no problems at all. First news story. FCC seeks comments in proceeding involving 70 centimetres and 5 centimetres. There are changes to the band, aren't there, Frank? And I know you said we're secondary, but I don't like losing frequencies, Frank.
Sure. And it's like we're housemates, and the other housemates are getting visitors in some sense. Back in the late 90s, I was involved with NASA in a large program to help commercialize the remote sensing industry. Particularly satellite images were exclusively here in the States taken by government, NASA primarily, and they wanted to become the biggest customer of a new industry. Well, this is just another element of that, as we here in the States at least have continued to get private enterprise and some very celebrated big name companies getting involved with launching satellites and spacecraft and hoping to have recreational space travel as something that they sell to the public. They got to have comms. And as they replace government agencies, NASA among others, they got to have frequency space. So I see this as a natural outgrowth, as much as we don't particularly like it. In 70 SIMs and 5 SIMs, 420 to 430 and 5650 to 5925. Well, we are, housemates, if you will, on those bands. We will probably, I don't want to say we'll lose frequencies, but we'll be constrained if this goes through as planned, in that we might have to have quiet time on some or both bands or frequencies on those bands. So it's something that we should weigh in on and give comment. That's the way the Independent Federal Communications Commission operates. So if you have a comment on this, please follow our show notes or the ARRL website or Google it and make your comments known. I would add that to the extent we play Mr. and Ms. Nice Guy on this thing, is that we perhaps get the ARL to do some inside baseball lobbying with, giving us perhaps a little greater access on some other frequencies. Because particularly 70 SIMs, it's a very important frequency band here. But I don't see us really stopping this, Martin. I may be wrong, but I just think it's a fait accompli, as Edmund Spicer might say in French to us if he were here.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from, Frank. And, in many ways, I'm going to say to everybody, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it in many ways. And 70 SIMs is a band where not a lot of amateurs go, in fairness. I mean, ever since around the world, we did away with Morse as a requirement for amateur radio, people have gone down on HF, and HF seems to be where everybody wants to go. But there are some great things happening up on the higher frequencies. And if we don't use the bands, we'll lose them, won't we, Frank?
I think we will.
Yeah. So, Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, this story is related to the US, but it could easily highlight the situation for any amateur band in any country where we are the secondary user, we're not the primary user. We have no rights to tell around and say, no, you can't have that frequency, because it's 70 SEMs and 5 gigs are the primary users are either government or military. And I think, as Frank was saying, this is not a battle that's going to be won. If there's a possibility that the ARRL can get some benefits on other frequencies, be they microwave, UHF, HF, LF, VLF, great. But really, if we're a secondary user on a band, it means we are being basically put up with by the primary user. And if something changes where they need to use the band more, they will do. And that's life.
Yeah, I understand that, and I understand that 77s in the UK is a military band and we are the secondary users and all that sort of thing. But if we don't use it, then we'll lose a lot of these things. And I agree with Frank that, getting extra allocation in certain areas, and 60 metres would be one that I think we should be chasing for. Bigger slice of the band there, and make it available all around the world, so it makes more sense. Everybody can operate, but we're going to have to push on, because there's so much commercial stuff going forward that we could lose lots of frequencies if we're not careful. And I think it's possibly because we don't pay a lot for our license. But did I say that out loud? Well, right, I did, but there you go. Let's hope we retain a good wedge there. Moving on to our next news story. The guys had a bit of a giggle at me over this one, because I explained what I read the first time I read the title. It says Australia 2x1 or 2x1 call signs, and I thought, what's Australia getting an intermediate call sign, a UK intermediate call sign, a 2x? And then the brain kicked in. It is a 2x1 call sign. Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, okay. It's a nice, interesting link to what you just said before. This is a country, Australia is a country where they do still pay for the license, and it is relatively expensive, especially for youngsters. And in this particular situation, there has been lobbying from both of the both of the representative societies in Australia. And about a year ago, the decision was made that, yes, there's going to be some new call signs around, and the 2x1. What that means is it's 2 letters before the number and 1 letter after. So a very short call sign. And of course, there's a limited number of these. And the push from the WIA at the moment is to try and get something moving. However, the official statements that came out on the 29th from the ACMA, and also the statement from the AMC a few days earlier, basically saying, we're working on it, guys. We'll let you know when we get further. Please stop trying to put in applications for the call signs. We haven't got the system in place yet. So anybody who's sent us money will get the money sent back. But, wait, and we'll let you know when you can actually apply. There's a lot of talk around this of restricting the access, and this is something that concerns me. I think that amateur radio is supposed to be inclusive, not exclusive. And in this particular case, the WIA and RASA are both saying that these call signs should only be issued to contest operators, those that can prove that they've taken part in several amateur radio contests. To me, that is discrimination, because yes, having a short call sign is an advantage to a contest operator. It's also an advantage to a DXpeditioner or a DX hunter, to a SOTA operator, to an IOTA operator, to a Parks operator, to a lot of different parts of the hobby. So why restrict it only to people who have taken part in radio contests? It should be, in my opinion, as I believe was done in Spain, first come, first serve. And since there's only going to be 78 call signs, there is going to be a lot of shouting to get it. But I do see that they're talking about the call sign only being valid for 18 months. So, if you don't get it the first time, you can try and get it the second time and third time, I suppose. So this must be a call sign that's in addition to your existing call sign. Let's see what happens, but this is somewhat of a non-item in so much as the regulator and the licensing authority have come back and said, we're not ready yet, we are working on it, wait and see. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I'm glad that they're putting a time limit on the call sign, because if there's so few call signs, it almost, I would suggest that you would have to, if I was doing it, make sure that people actually use it. And if you are giving it to a contest station, it has to be a contest station that's on regularly. If you are giving it to somebody who does SOTA or whatever, that person has to be out and about, and it has to be on there a lot.
I disagree with that, because that's an infringement on personal rights.
Why is that?
Because you're going to be monitoring people in such a way, and remember, they don't have to keep a log anymore. You couldn't manage that. I mean, I'm all for first come, first serve, or even a lottery. What they do in Australia is for the 2x2 call signs, certainly within New South Wales, where, again, very few available, lots of people want them, is they actually have a lottery to choose who gets it. And any other method where you're measuring how many contests somebody's entered or how many times they've gone to a summit or whatever else, it would be a nightmare to manage. And I think, quite honestly, unfair. First come, first served.
Well, my only concern was that you could have dead man's shoes. You know, somebody gets the call sign, they have it 18 months, they then just reapply to keep it and reapply to keep it and reapply to keep it, and it doesn't get used.
Well, you could say the same thing about foundation licenses or intermediate or full licenses as well. Do you take the call sign away from an amateur if he doesn't use it?
You could very well. And in some ways, maybe the amateurs should only use their most recent license. But we can go at this one forever. Frank, what's your thoughts?
I'm a bit ignorant, although I've tried to learn a bit about amateur radio in Aussie land. As I believe Ed has said, there are really two equivalent of the ARRLs. There are two different groups there that purport to represent the interests of amateur radio. And as I look at this, we have a system in the States where there are temporary, short, simple call signs that are requested for a short period of time, primarily for a contest. I've been part of groups that have had them, and I suspect many of our listeners have as well. And Ed, let me ask you this: is this to be the intention of a permanent call sign allocation, or is it restricted in time? And I just missed that.
Yeah, according to the article, it says a period of time of around 18 months. And what you're referring to might be a good way to do it as well. Special event stations would apply for a short call sign or a special call sign in some way for a set period of time, which might be a weekend, a week, a month, whatever. Perhaps this could be done the same way.
Well, and you sort of anticipate where I was going. This is a scarce resource, like water might be in some places in the country, except this is for amateur radio, a scarce resource of a 2x1 call sign. And so you got the problem of who gets it, this prestigious thing, this very useful thing, and then how do you make that determination? We've kind of talked in the rehearsal, reputation just won't cut it. You've got to have a metric, and then some sort of metric put together haphazardly would be just as problematic. So having it restricted temporally to where on a first come, first served basis, there may be enough of them to allocate for some standing period of time that is not lengthy, and I realize that's a relative term. So without sort of touting what the U.S. is doing as the only way to do it, it's certainly not. Some version of that might be a way to help solve the conflict, because I agree with you, Ed. I would argue that just from an amateur radio point of view, it will do nothing but engender conflict.
Yeah, and I think the suggestion, well, the point is actually at the moment, the two groups, by the way, the WIA is the IARU representative group, so the one that's been around for a lot longer. RASA, the Radio Amateurs of Australia, Radio Amateurs Society Australia, is the new guys. Both of them actually do good work.
Chris, We as a club have a 1x2 call sign, which in many ways, when we've used it as a contest, people struggle with it, don't they?
Well, I was going to go on to that. Actually, take a slightly different slant on this topic. So a couple of things. I think it's actually more than 78, by the way. I think it's a few hundred. I think because you've got all the combinations of VK, VJ plus all the numbers. So I think it's going to be in the low hundreds, I think, rather than, but still a very small
number changes. Yep,
but still a very small number. So still a valid point. They're still very scarce, and I agree. Maybe some sort of, you buy chocolate bars and get a golden ticket and get one or something. I think it's I think they need to be careful about how they allocate them, like you say. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit of conflict. But yeah, as to Martin's point around, we have G2XP, which is a 1x2 call sign here in the UK, as a club call sign that we sometimes use in contests, and often you'll get a reply saying, "And your last letter, just what's your call?" And they're expecting to have a 1x3 call sign, so they think you're missing a letter off. They think they missed the last letter. So actually, sometimes it can slow things down if you've got someone that's inexperienced at the other end or didn't quite get the call sign properly. Sometimes it can actually slow things down. So it's not always a benefit, although I can see why having a short call sign would definitely be a benefit in a contest, especially if you're a very, very active contest station.
Yeah, and it also throws it even worse than that, Chris, if we put the club designator in and call it Golf X-Ray 2 X-Ray Papa. That really throws people's heads. But it's a valid call sign. It belongs to the Sutton and Cheam Amateur Radio Society.
Well, I can go a slight story on that. So I was actually contacted because G2XP was actually a member. It was actually originally allocated to a member who sadly passed away many, many, many years ago. And I think his grandson, or it might have been his nephew, got in touch a while ago saying that he's now a licensed amateur. He lives in the Midlands somewhere, and he actually wanted to arrange a contact who could actually work us with his, I think either his uncle, I don't have to remember now, I'll have to look it up, but with his relatives' call signs. So unfortunately, because of lockdown, we've not been able to do it yet, but we're planning to do that, and he'll be able to work us, which I think will be quite good for him, quite nice.
Yeah, so off a slight tangent, but interesting that call signs become quite emotive at times, and let's hope whatever goes on, it gets sorted fairly. Moving to our next news story, a new version of WSJT-X. That seemed to be every other episode we have something about this, but okay, there's some new stuff come into it, which hopefully going to make it quite useful. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. These guys that are developing it, I know Joe Taylor is part of that team, but I know it's not just him on his own. I think they're doing a phenomenal job, and they're really pushing the boundaries around some of this low power, very small signal or low kind of technology. They're really pushing the boundaries, and this is yet another feature within that application. And it just seems like you say, almost not every episode, but certainly quite regularly, they're bringing out new versions and really pushing this forward. So I've not this particular thing. I've not researched myself what's in the latest version, but I'm sure it'll be good for a certain use. So yeah, it just talk about tropospheric scatter and various other scatters and EME, etc. So it could be useful for certain amateurs that have a particular specialism.
Certainly could. Now, Frank, you looked at some of the specialities and you thought, I quite like that, didn't you?
Yes, and I'll sort of admit I've taken a little bit of a liking in specific use cases of FT8, and I just admire the work that Joe Taylor and Professor Frankie up at University of Illinois have developed here. The part about Q65, I think, will be really a boon to those that do troposcatter, rain scatter, IO scatter, things like that, Earth, Moon, Earth. I was listening to an episode of a fellow podcast, people we know well, the Ham Radio Workbench, and they had a guest talking about microwave amateur radio and things to do above 1 gigahertz. and the predictability of things like bouncing off of aircraft where you've got routine patterns. And I think most of the other presenters here have knowledge of examples of where some others have used some of these things. And I think this is just going to help within the WSJT genre of modes. It's going to help implement that. And so there you go. I think that's progress.
Yeah, I think it's positive because there are developments, and this is not a dead product. It's something that's moving forward and keeping the hobby fresh. What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, I just want to point out what we're talking about here is WSJT-X 2.4.0 GA release, in other words, the full release. And we've said these guys are always developing. In fact, in parallel to that, we already have 2.5.0 release candidate 2 came out about a week ago. So even as we're talking about the new features in 2.4, there are people already testing 2.5. So I'm not sure what the changes are in that. I've got the code. I should really look at what's in there. But yeah, they're continuing on. And yeah, it's great to keep adding more and more to it and getting more and more efficient for specific needs. And as we said, the Q65 is apparently aimed at like scatter type, aircraft scatter and meteor scatter, etc. Type of communication. So it'll be interesting to see what comes in 2.5 and 2.6 and so on.
Certainly will, Ed, certainly will. Now, just as an aside, Frank, you mentioned that on the previous episode that we recorded you weren't on, we talked about Bitcoin transfer via FT8, and you wanted to give us an update on a few bits.
Well, we've covered several stories, about this. And I think one of the devil in the details is that we're all for experimentation. I think every one of us enjoys experimenting with amateur radio. That's part of the magic and the motivation. But we do have regulations here in the States. Our Code of Federal Regulations, Part 97, directs us not to engage in any kind of activity in which we can gain some financial benefit, i.e. you cannot be paid to broadcast. A few years ago, this particular podcast organized an activity that was benign to most anyone who thought about it, the Work Howard Mickle event. We're going to put Howard Mickle, then the CEO of ARRL, to work by working him through W1AW, and the attorneys of record for the ARRL says, he's a paid employee. If we do that, one could make the argument that he's being paid to broadcast. And so we all thought that was silly, yet in an abundance of caution, we didn't want the ARRL to come under fire for that, so we sort of folded our tent. And that was probably an overreaction, in my humble opinion, but yet it seemed to be the reaction that we needed to take. However, here we're using a cryptocurrency in the form of Bitcoin. It was my understanding that Ham in Brazil and perhaps one in the state had actually done this. Now, let's just imagine it was transferring a string of numbers, that nobody actually benefited by the activity financially. Okay, that sounds like experimentation. But it doesn't matter whether you make any money or not. If the activity is part of a financial transaction, we get a tough question. So I know Riley Hollingsworth, who is manager of the volunteer monitor program with ARRL. He and I have a question with Laura Smith at FCC for them to sort of evaluate this. This is a technology that we've covered. It's emerging. It's new. Wow, somebody experiments with this, and yet we might inadvertently stumble into something that does violate Part 97. And yet we're then showing others in the financial literature, and these have been covered in a cryptocurrency magazine. That is, those who are not hams are saying, wow, amateur radio can do some trading here over radio. Maybe we should get licensed and do that. So there's used to be a famous TV show here in the States. It was called the Andy Griffith Show, and it was about a rural sheriff in North Carolina. And he had a bumbling deputy, a comedian played by Don Knotts, Barney Fife. And Barney was a caricature, but occasionally Andy would give Barney a bullet, and he was very important. So without sounding like Barney Fife on the day you get a bullet, we certainly would like the FCC to weigh in and say yes or no. Is this something that's okay with ham radio? No, it is not okay with ham radio. Don't do it. So like Barney Fife used to say, you need to nip it in the bud. So we'll see what the FCC says, but I wanted to at least bring that to the attention of our listeners, since that was not raised on the previous, episode. And I thought the story was well covered. Just wanted to raise that issue, Martin.
Yeah, no problems, mate. No problems on that one, Frank. Well, in fairness, that's why I wanted to give you airtime on that to raise, other things we hadn't thought of. And it's a difficult one because we are in a grey area of various bits and pieces. And yeah, you're dead right. We do need the legislators to tell us what is or is not correct when we get into these grey areas, because I don't think anybody goes out their way to deliberately do something wrong, but occasionally we get into a grey area. Right, let's move to our next news story. The woodpecker. God, don't you remember the woodpecker back in the 70s and 80s? What a pain that was on HF. I remember it, and I wasn't even in a hobby. I had a scanner and could hear all sorts of noise. But yeah, the woodpecker is now a cultural heritage site. So I think it's an interesting one. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, the actual site, or the actual antenna, is called Duga-1, D-U-G-A-1, and it's now in the Ukraine. I believe it used to be classified as Russia previously. And extra to the text that we've got in the on the website at the moment, I was reading some more up about this, and it appears that one of the reasons that the Chernobyl power station was built where it was, when it was to power the woodpecker system, because it needed so much power for what it was radiating. And that was actually basically the missile screen to spot any Western nations' missiles coming in to hit Russia. Or the Russian Confederation at the time, and it had to be so powerful to cover such a large area. And there was also some rumours, which may only be rumours, that were going around that one of the reasons, or one of the things they were doing at the Chernobyl reactor at the time of the disaster, was actually upgrading part of it to get more power so that they could run the woodpecker at a higher power level. So basically Chernobyl was apparently built for this transmitter, powered the town and everything else, of course, as well. But its reason for being there was this over-the-horizon radar. And, we all know what happened, unfortunately, the worst nuclear disaster in the world has ever had. So don't turn the power up on your linears, lads. You might have a big problem. Or you might cause somebody else a big problem.
Yeah, certainly, Ed. Well, I know what it's like. I mean, I've seen valves glowing red hot inside because they've been overdriven. But, Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I think the woodpeckers, it's just interesting that this is now a protected cultural monument. I think that's very interesting that this is now part of the world's history, isn't it, I suppose, this big radar tower. It's just very interesting, I suppose, isn't it? Especially if you're into kind of technology like we are. A bit like when we went over to Dayton and saw the big transmitter site there that was really originally used, the one that was the Ohio, the one that Hitler called the something liars. And
the Cincinnati Liars.
Thank you, Frank. The Cincinnati Liars. Yeah, that's just interesting to see. Old technology. So, I think it would be. I think they're going to get quite a few folks actually going to want to go and see that. It was I believe it was a phenomenal amount of power that thing put out, especially as Ed was saying, requiring its own power station essentially to power it. So I think it'd be quite interesting to actually go and see sometime.
Yeah, well, I believe because probably Ed was only one around in the hobby when the Woodpecker was actually active. I'm guessing Ed, but I know that Chris, myself, and Frank probably weren't.
Yeah, well, I was on VHF at the time, so I only heard of it from other amateurs.
All right, but it was, everybody knew about it, and as I say, they're still over the horizon radar today. We still hear it ticking away occasionally. But what's your thoughts, Frank?
Well, I was not a licensed ham, but I was a shortwave listener and a very ardent one. And so I certainly heard the consequences of the Russian woodpecker. And, you know, it is a cultural thing. I mean, those in the radio world, whether they were listeners only or hams as well, certainly remember it. So I think it's a nice story. We may be surprised that was the case, but I think Ed's bit of somewhat unknown history, I certainly didn't know it. It's good to know that the Chernobyl reactor was actually linked to the Woodpecker over-the-horizon radar station. And now some of the over-the-horizon radar systems around the world are coming back, unfortunately. So interesting thing. And I think there's a great connection there to the Bethany, Ohio site, as Chris mentioned, that we got to see up close and personal some of the initial incredibly powerful transmitters that were at that site there in Bethany, Ohio. And so the same thing with the Dougal 1 here. So I think it's very cool.
Yeah, as I say, very interesting. And I'm sure lots of people will be interested in that news story. Right, let's move to our last news story. I like this one. This is a feel-good story. In Norway, they've just radio amateurs for use in radio emergency comms have just been allocated 820,000 kroner, which UK-wise is about £69,651 towards improving emergency comms. States-wise, I'm guessing we're looking at about $75,000, I would guess, but that's only my rough head working out. What's your thoughts on this one, Chris?
Yeah. So this one's, I mean, it makes me think that, okay, it sounds like a lot of money, but if this was in the commercial world, that sort of money wouldn't really go very far. But it sort of shows that as amateurs, you know, we can use some relatively cheap equipment and actually make a massive difference. You know, we're not going to have to put in some big network or, you know, to provide communications. We need very simple equipment, you know, a very simple aerial, you know, a transceiver, some sort of power supply, a bit of a feeder, and that's pretty much us operating. So even though it sounds like a lot of money in our terms, if you look at it in sort of commercial terms, if this was a commercial organisation that was going to, you know, run a project to provide some emergency comms, I don't think that would actually go very far. So I think it actually shows that us amateurs are actually, you know, pretty good value. But no, I mean, and obviously excellent that it's happened and we got the money, or we haven't got the money, but this particular group has donated this money in that region. So I think it's really good. And like I say, I think it just shows that we are, you know, respected. We know the amateur radio community is seen as some people that can be very useful in events where things go wrong, and yeah, you know, obviously that's good that they've donated that money.
Certainly is. Well, that's a good one. Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, it is a feel-good story, and it's a very positive story. And the Norwegian Amateur Radio Relay League, which I kind of note the parallel to the ARL, it's kind of interesting. They're benefiting, but I want to point out an extra layer of what's really good about this. The foundation, whose name none of us were willing to pronounce, because it's a lot of consonants in it, is the Jensendige or something close foundation. It comes from the financial industry in Norway, so it is their foundation. And for the amateur radio group there in Norway to curry favor, to be seen as legitimate enough to receive a sizable grant, I think that's even higher praise for that particular group. It's one thing if the government gave them some money to help them build out their MCOM infrastructure, but this is the foundation from the financial sector, which tends to not, sort of dole out things for causes that don't directly benefit them. And yet, being in the insurance world, this sort of does benefit them. So I see that layer is perhaps even of higher import, if you will, to the story than just a national MCOM group got some money. It's the source of money that my hat is even off in bigger time, if you will, to them.
Yeah, it certainly is, and it's nice that they've been recognised. Ed, final words on this one?
Yeah, just filling a bit of background, reading through the article, what the money is actually going to, or at least partially going to, is tracking, so that I presume APRS, but it might be a commercial system instead, but the same idea as APRS, so that the volunteer teams are going out to rescue people or to monitor the disaster or whatever can be seen centrally where they are. And that, of course, adds safety. That adds a lot of safety to the operations. And, yeah, the fact that the commercial world is sponsoring it, as Frank says, if they've had involvement in insurance, they actually get a payback because, the better, the more efficient the emergency teams are, the better, the less financial damage that a community would incur from, for example, a wildfire or something. So, yeah, just want to add that it's tracking systems that apparently the money's going on. And for that price, they'll probably get quite a few.
Yeah, they certainly will. Well, that's good news, and I think that was a nice warm feeling to finish up for amateur radio on this episode. Right, let's find out what the boys have been up to. And we'll start with Chris, and I'll work left to right across my sheet. Chris, what have you been up to since the last time?
I've actually done very little radio, to be honest. The only radio I think I've actually operated is my Fusion handhelds, and mainly in the car, talking to, yourself, Martin, and others on the ICQ podcast talk group. I've done very little. Unfortunately, I've been very busy for the last few weeks. Bought a new to me camper van. So I've been doing quite a bit of stuff in that. And unfortunately, radio is at second place. So I am thinking about, but I have not yet actually got around to putting a radio in the van. I've got a spare one I can put in there, but it's a question of figuring out where it's going to go. But that's potentially one piece of work or one activity I need to do. But no, in terms of actual other radio activities, I've done. And in a minute, Martin, probably going to remind me of things I've done and I've forgotten I've done. But I've done very little. We had a talk at the Radio Club, which I'd arranged with Kevin, Laura and Richardson, who I know we've had on the podcast before. They were talking about their many adventures on bikes, on canoes. I think they called it boats, bikes and boots, or boots, boats and bikes, or those words in a certain order. I forget which way around it was now. But, talking about going adventures on cycling, adventures in canoes, adventures going up big hills. So that was a very interesting and entertaining talk we had the other week. But no, apart from that, I've not done an awful lot of radio, I'm afraid.
No, I know you have been busy on other things, and I would suggest your 857's a good candidate for your camper van, mate. But there you go.
Yeah, no, absolutely could be. Yeah, I mean, I've got a few radios knocking about, so I could pick one that would go in there, certainly. Yes, the trouble is, it's actually very tall. Put a mag mount on, and probably involving a ladder to actually get up there to get on the roof, so it's not quite as simple as with the car. But we'll see. But before you start, Martin, no, I'm not going to drill a hole in the roof.
Oh, Frank's coming over from the States. He's flying over tomorrow to help.
He's bringing his drill. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, we'll see.
Oh dear, I'll behave myself. Okay, Ed, what have you been up to then?
I should be jumping in to tell you to stop and behave yourself, Martin. I was a bit slow on that one. But yeah, Frank, when you bring the drill over, make sure it's a dual voltage. Sticking a 110 volt drill into the 220 volt or 240 volt electric in the UK, not a good idea.
Got it.
Well, it might go pretty quick. It might spin around pretty quickly, but yeah.
Yeah. The listeners would have heard my presentation on my new toy last, I think it was in the last show, the Zygo G90. I've been playing around with that. I've had it up onto a couple of summits on the air and a couple of HEMA, or one HEMA summit as well. It's working very well. A lot of my time has been taken up working with the developer of the remote control software that I mentioned last time as well, Pocket RxTX. That's Dan Toma YO3GGX. There's a major update coming in the next couple of months with a lot of new features and things. Can't say much more than that, but it consumes your time when you're testing. And that's mainly what I've been doing. Had a bit of a shock the other night, a couple of nights ago, when the storm came through and took one of my masts down, just a fiberglass mast that holds up my wire antenna here at home. But luckily, it didn't fall on anything important, and managed to get that all repaired in about 15 minutes flat. But the first time I've actually had a mast come down in the storm. We've had some pretty hefty storms through here over the last few years, so a word of warning to people: just regularly check your mast supports and things, because that one was actually the support that broke, not the mast. That was about it, and that's kept me fairly busy. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, it sounds like you've been busy, and at least you get the area up pretty quickly, as you said. Just move the pole to another mounting point. Frank, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke on the podcast? I mean, because you weren't able to make the last one.
Right. It's been a bit, and have been busy. Operated field day here in the States with my portable operations team, but we weren't stupid. We were operating 2D in the air conditioning, as we said, 2D in the AC. It was very hot here. We only had a 3-person team this time around. We missed K5XU, our CW operator, but we did have a pretty good outing. We had just shy of 290 contacts, mostly on sideband. We missed working all states in that one event by just 9 states. And what was amazing to us was that we had a significant run of 167 contacts in a row late Saturday evening, ending about 11 p.m. local time on 20 meters. I had been watching my Whisper beacon, and it had been open, listening to some Australians work Georgia, for example, the previous night on Friday night, my Whisper beacon, watching that. So that was pretty exciting, and we had a good time. The biggest resource we had was our host, N5DU's wife, is a trained chef. So the victuals were truly outstanding. Another thing is I'm completing the test of a Cushcraft D4 rotatable dipole. It's a dipole for 40 through 10 meters. It's installed in a fixed mount in my loft. Been running that on my Whisper beacon, swept it and got it tuned up, but I put it on the air. And the best contact I had was a station in Texas on 40 meters, but using 5 watts for an attic antenna on sideband with my Zygu X5105. So it's working, and I'll have that review published on my blog soon. Scott Wright, K0MD, and I are revising our paper on generational changes in ARL sweepstakes contesting. I think, Martin, last time I was on, I said we'd submitted it to QST. Well, it was not accepted for publication in QST, but it looks like it will be coming out in the National Contesting Journal in at least a revised form. And the results are somewhat striking. We think the methods are path-breaking. Nobody that we've found has examined changes over a 2-decade period in CW and sideband participants, and it'll have a stark story to tell when it comes out. Scott and I are beginning to accept invitations to give talks to clubs by Zoom. So if any of our listeners are interested in contesting and demographic changes, contact either Scott Wright, K0MD, or me. We're both good on QRZ. I will end with a request that Ed come back and add something he's been working on that he didn't mention. He's got a complementary activity that he's organizing to go with the 2021 Portable Operations Challenge. Bill is not here on this episode, but he and Ed are both on the steering committee. Ed, tell us what you've been working. It's a complementary activity to the POC.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if that's not already on the ICQ podcast website and sent out in the emails, because I did I'm pretty sure I sent it to Colin, but we'll see. Yeah, okay, the concept is quite simple. If you have a small group that perhaps are not big enough or experienced enough to actually run their own contest, you can actually, in parallel to another contest, and we're suggesting you do this with the Portable Operations Challenge, gather a group of people together and that want to take part in your, if you like, your club contest, your regional contest, perhaps some other group contest that keeps you together. It's part of the hobby together, and register with us. And then at the end of the contest, when the Portable Operations Challenge people have done all the hard work of the rules and the scoring and everything else, you then simply take the final rules, filter out your contestants, and you have your own contest results. It's a little way to have a little club contest within the bigger contest. So you don't actually need to register to take part in the Portable Operations Challenge. Let me make that correct. Just if you want us to advertise and list that you're doing this, then you need to send an email to regionalcontestlist@gmail.com. And that will then get to me and we'll get you added to the list. So a bit of publicity there for you on the website. And as I say, the resulting thing is that you got your own little local club can effectively have your own contest between the members of the club who all enter the Portable Operations Challenge as normal entrants. And maybe you only come 132nd in the big contest, but you might come first within your own group. So that's the ideas. That's been put out on a few of the social media setups. I'll double check with Colin that we've got it up on the ICQ podcast website as well. So that's the place you want to go and have a look for the details. Thanks for the prompt there, Frank.
Sure, and we look forward to that. And by entering the Portable Operations Challenge, which is, one of our promotional partners is the ICQ podcast. So you'll be able to work people that can compete with the big guns. So the way we've got that scored, and go to foxmikehotel.com/challenge if you want to read all about it. Martin, that's really what I've been up to since I've been off.
Well, that sounds phenomenal, Frank, and what Ed's doing as well. You've both been very, very busy. What have I been up to? Well, I did rewire the shack the other day because it was looking a bit messy, so I went in there and rewired my shack. I have had some contacts on HF, on 20 metres over the last week. I've also operated 4 metres in the UK. It's quite strange in South London. There are a number of people that have 4 metres, and every now and again one of them puts a call out. And if I'm in the shack with my 4 metre rig on, amongst many other things, I usually go back to them. So that one happened. I've tried as much as possible to be on Fusion and DMR via the ICQ podcast group. You shouldn't be able to tell whether I'm on Fusion or DMR because the bridge works that well. But I've been off 2 weeks with Mrs. B, just having had a knee operation, so I've not operated quite as much as normal. Did mention the last episode that we had a fox come in the back door while I was recording. It's been shuttled tonight. However, we did buy, Carol bought fox scarers, these ultrasonic fox scarers. They're about as useful as an ashtray on a motorcycle, in fairness. They really don't seem to frighten the fox. The fox is out in the back garden the other day, sort of lazing by the thing, not at all bothered by the noise it was making, so I don't think it's a lot of good. The only thing I have noticed is that my neighbour's got one as well. They both, although it's ultrasonic, they must be square wave ultrasonic because they wipe out 10 metres. There's wall-to-wall noise across 10 metres. So, and had one once before, had the same problem. So, nothing I can do about it. I'd rather lose 10 metres than be out there dealing with the damage and the fox put did have a little go at gateways on the air, which we covered the other episode. Wasn't terribly successful, but that was probably more me than anything else. And the last thing I did was last week, just as the ISS was going over, so just to prove it could be done with literally minuscule equipment, I got a picture off the ISS in slow scan TV using a Handie Talkie and a mobile phone running an SSTV program. So it can be done, guys. You don't have to have everything. When the ISS is sending pictures, if it's coming over and you can hear it, you should be able to decode it. And a Handie Talkie with a mobile phone app running works quite well. The only thing I will say is hold the Handie Talkie, because that helps with a bit of a ground plane, although you could put a ground plane on the antenna, and hold the antenna horizontal, hold the Handie Talkie horizontal. You'll get better results that way. So that's what I've been up to. Reasonable amount, I suppose. But there you go.
Can I just jump in before you finish to confirm that Colin has indeed got the details about the parallel regional or local group competitions to run alongside the Portable Operations Challenge. It's in the bottom half of the main page when you go to ICQpodcast.com, or alternatively, I've just set up a tiny URL for it. So this is tinyurl.com/ all lowercase now, Echo 2 Juliet, Kilo Alpha Mike Delta Alpha, E2J Camda. Don't ask me why it says that. That's just the letters it chose. But yeah, the details are there if anybody's interested in doing that and running their own little competition alongside the Portable Operations Challenge by taking part in the Portable Operations Challenge. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, Ed. No problems at all. Okay, well, all that's left for me to do now is close up this episode's News Roundtable. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and we'll catch up with you a bit later, I'm sure. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant, TD5LP.
Thanks a lot, Martin.
Yeah, no problems, Ed. Good to have you. And moving the other side of the pond, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
And thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure, Martin.
Yeah, it's always fun. And I think we have fun on these. And I know the listeners enjoy us nattering about all sorts of things. So all that's left for me to do is say 73 to you guys, and we'll move on with the next part of the podcast. 73, guys.
73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to look at the news in brief with me, Colin, M6BLY. Start off with news here in Japan, and great news here that the Japanese Amateur Radio League have announced for the first time in 27 years an increase in membership. Now, membership, reverses decline by a climb of 574 amateurs over a 12-month period. And when looking at this, they give reason to this being the fact that the coronavirus, has brought people some time to be able to investigate new hobbies, etc. And obviously as well the opportunity of reaching out and communicating with people using radio. They've been working hard as well in terms of their marketing with TV and newspaper interviews, etc., to generate interest in the hobby in the meantime. Now, they're very excited as well that using upcoming events like the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics, which is postponed this year, and QSO parties, in addition with their Ham Fair 2021, which takes place in October, is going to also allow them to gain more a hold of new amateurs and amateurs getting interested in the hobby, etc. Going forward. So as I say, great news in Japan that they're finding, say that there's a growth in membership and an interest in the hobby, in these times. In France, a new online directory of amateur radio operators has been released by the National Frequency Agency. It's obviously a list of all the things that you would expect. It takes into account the implications of the European Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. But it allows people to do various search and criteria on the publicly available information that you can find from there. So as always, we're going to put a link to this on the ICQ podcast webpage for you. And say if you're interested in what's going on in France, or you're an amateur in France and you want to get access to information, certainly there's that opportunity for you to do that from there. And we finish off with news in Australia. New frequency allocation table has been published. This is version number 11, which has been published. It incorporates a number of updates from the ITU radio regulations, including a number of modifications in the recent planning of the 1700 to 2300 megahertz section and the 3.5 gigahertz band as well. So we'll put a link as well to download that of new frequency table on the show. Right, so we're going to head over to a features episode now, and this episode's feature is a feature on an 8-watt walkie-talkie. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this feature, I wanted to talk about a high-powered handheld, or Watt Handie Talkie as you call them in the States. Now, I guess a number of you are going to switch off for a minute I tell you what it is, but just this is an open and honest opinion of a piece of equipment that arrived for me to have a look at. Now, I instantly say it wasn't faulty. My next door neighbour does motorsport, and his club have got a licence for various frequencies, and he popped round and he said, "Martin, this thing looks just far too complicated to program it. How do you program it?" And I looked at it and thought, I could do that. So the radio in question can actually put out 8 watts, which is quite a lot for a handy talkie. So if you've got a need for a high-powered handy talkie, this might be an option. Now, the radio I'm talking about is a Baofeng UV82. Now, I've owned a few Baofengs in my time. I've got 3 UV3s, and I must admit 2 of them were given to me. I bought 1 and 2 were given to me. I've also got a UV5R, which lives most of its life in the side door pocket of the car for emergency use if should I need one. But so I was quite interested to have a look at this. And he wanted something like 42 different channels programmed into this radio. And in fairness, if you don't know anything about radio and all the bits and pieces, it's quite daunting to program it in. So I looked at it and thought, well, it's a Baofeng. They pretty much use the same cable. So I went online, downloaded the Baofeng UV8 software, and my UV5R Baofeng USB cable worked perfectly okay with it. So it looks like pretty much most Baofengs will program off the same USB cable. Now, the software that we used was the proprietary one, and in fairness, although it worked, it was not very nice to use. There were bits that I thought just didn't flow. You clicked on something and it just sat and looked at you. So the actual software, although you can do it, and it's far easier than using the keypad, it wasn't particularly a nice experience. At the end, after I got it programmed, I did spin up Chirp, and there is a version of Chirp that will program the UV8T2. So don't be put off with the software. However, what else can this thing do? Well, it's a dual bander, and it'll do VHF between 136 megs and 174, so it's wideband. It will do UHF between 400 megs and 520 megs. Okay, that's out of bounds. A lot of that's out of bound for both VHF and UHF for us amateurs. But it's nice to have the extra frequencies if you want to listen, or if you're an amateur and also have license frequencies at your company or whatever and want to use them. Now, what else can I tell you about it? Well, it's a dual band radio, VHF, UHF, which is pretty much all handy talkies are. It's a dual display, so it has two lines on the display. One is for channel A and one's for channel B. And you can watch dual frequencies at the same time. And it says it has dual standby, although I didn't get a chance to try that. Now, what I kind of liked about it is it had two PTT buttons. So if I wanted to transmit on the top memory location, I push the top PTT button. If I wanted to transmit on the bottom one, I push the bottom button. Or that's as it appeared to work when I had a little go in the workshop. And I'm quite impressed. The build quality was very, very good. And in fairness, you can pick one of these up, and I've seen them advertised for about between £23 and £30 in the UK. So not a lot of money. The battery is a 1800 amp hour battery, and they say, and I can only quote what the manufacturer is quoting, they say that you can get 2 to 3 days of use out of this battery. I find that a little hard to believe, because it does depend on how much transmitting you're doing. Equally, if you're transmitting at 8 watts, you're going to run the battery out a hell of a lot quicker than you would running on low power. So just be aware of that. It does a lot of different nice steps. It does frequency steps between 2.5 to 50 kilohertz. The one missing, which is a minor one, is 8.33, which is used for aircraft. But because this radio only does FM and not FM and AM, that's not a great problem. But you've got frequency steps of 2.5, 5, 6.25, 10, 12, 20, 25, 30 and 50 kilohertz steps. So there's more than enough there for everybody to set your step range up, whatever you're going to do with it. In fairness, yeah, I didn't get terribly long with it. I haven't done a technical review for you guys because I didn't put it on any test equipment. My next door neighbour was desperate to use it. He's off to an event and he just needed it programmed up. So I done that for him this afternoon. Questions he asked me. How can I make it go further? Well, this is where the amateur bit kicks in, isn't it? So I says to him, you can either connect an aerial socket, take the little rubber duck aerial off, fit an aerial plug onto that, and then plug onto a mag mount. Or you could put on a ground plane with a couple of wires, and I've talked about this before, extending your range, and that works very well. So, interesting radio. I'm personally not in the market for another analog radio. Some of you might be. I think I would not be too disappointed with this one price-wise. From what I've seen, with the build quality and everything, if I was looking for another analog handy talkie. At the moment I'm not, so there you go. Manual was pretty good. There were a couple of little issues I spotted in the manual. It was showing a device that plugs into the cigarette lighter and then looked as though it plugged into the speaker and mic socket. So it's obviously they've used an old graphic, but predominantly there's everything you need to know in the manual as well. The manual's available online. The software, if you want to use Baofeng software, is available online. You just do a search for it. And don't forget, you can also run it with Chirp. So, all in all, very quick review of something that passed my hands about 2 hours ago. And I think it was worth having a look at. Some of you might get some use out of it. Others are probably going to say, no, it's Chinese, I'm never going to touch it. Either way, buyer beware. Your call. I thought it was quite a nice piece of kit. I hope this was of use.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed Dad's feature there on the 8-watt Handie Talkie, and something you only just got your hands on the last couple of days, I believe.
Yeah, it certainly was. As I said in the feature, my next door neighbour popped round. He's not into radio at all, but his motorsport group have got licences for various frequencies, and he came around and said, can you do this for me? And I looked at it and thought, yeah, I can. It's I think I've got a program cable for it, and I did as well, so it worked well.
Fantastic. Well, that's your good deed done for the week, so fair play to you for doing that. Now, update on D-Star, the DMR group, should I say, which obviously includes D-Star amongst many other of the digital networks. I understand you had some nice growth on our D-Star group.
Yeah, certainly did. And on the bottom of the Digital Talk Group page, or our DMR page on our website, I put some stats for anybody who's interested. The growth this month, we went up by 33 IDs. That's DMR IDs. There is some strange anomalies that might be more than that, but I can't prove it. We also increased the number of connections by 3,247. So, yeah, 3,200 odd connections in a month is not bad. And we increased by one country. Oman joined the group. I work the gentleman in Oman as well myself. So I also published a list of countries. I put it on our website, but I post it out on Facebook to show that the 26 countries that we're working through our talk group are obviously quite interesting. So there you go, Colin.
Exactly. And the Brandmeister hose lines, is a very handy tool there, and there's a link to that link on the ICQ podcast webpage. So if you're just in the office or somewhere where you maybe can't operate but would just like to listen in, there's a link on the ICQ webpage where you can actually get a link to listen to the talk group and what's going on there. So please feel free to take part. It's something we're having a lot of fun setting up and using. So yeah, certainly check that out from there. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our donors who very kindly keep us advert-free and help us pay our way and find value in the show and what we do. So we'd like to thank Philip Heckinbotham, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot, and Dave Renton, Golf 1 Delta Uniform Mike, as they for helping us out. Many thanks and appreciate. If you found some value from the show and the projects that we're involved in, please feel free to support us. All you have to do is think about what you've used and what you found value in, turn it into a financial number, and visit icqpodcast.com/donate, where there's many options and ways of popping a few shekels in our bucket to help us pay our way and keep everything we do advert free. So I'd appreciate everything you do with that side of things. As always, I'd like to thank the guys who joined you in the News Roundtable, Dad. That's Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Ed, DD5, Lima Papa, and Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, for taking part as in the News Roundtable. So many thanks for joining the guys from there. Right, well, I think that just about covers everything from there, Dad. Now, I know Phil mentioned to us at the start of the show about Tim Tams, if I'm right, rather than Tam Tams like I called them a couple of weeks ago. So Tim Tams, I don't know yet if they're appearing yet on the shelves in the UK with the new post-Brexit trade deal with, the Australians. But I'm sure if they haven't, you've been to the shops this week and found Mum a lovely biscuit to go with a cup of tea for us this morning.
Yes, certainly have, Colin. I'll find Mum a bicky and make a cup of tea in a minute. The interesting one on the Tim Tams, Phil also sent me, is something that people are doing. They're nibbling the one of the top corners off and the diagonally opposite bottom corner off, and using Tim Tams as a straw to suck your coffee up through the chocolate filling. Sounds interesting, and Phil tells me that when it all goes soggy, you're supposed to put it all in your mouth in one go. Now, I haven't tried it. Phil tells me he hasn't tried it. I have to believe him on this one, but there is a bit of a giggle with Tim Tams, and there's a bit of a challenge to do it. So you're supposed to suck your tea or your coffee up through the centre filling, Colin. I think it would get very, very messy, though. But there you go. So thanks for that one, Phil. And, I think our brains were in neutral that day.
Well, I think as we have an ICQ presenter that likes to dunk stuff in tea anyway, I think if we can get hold of a packet of these Tim Tams, we should pass them on to our dear friend Leslie to give us a review on this this very important task. So we'll put that on the to-do list and see if we can get hold of a packet from there. Well, everyone, I think that's about everything covered for you on this episode of the ICQ podcast. Pleasure you being with us on episode number 354. And as I say, we'll work away and we'll produce another show for you in a fortnight's time. So we'll see you then. 73, Zil.
Yeah, 73.